The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
There'll be a transition cost and transition problems, but in the end, it's going to be a beautiful thing.
Trump trade roller coaster. World markets fluctuate amid a wave of tariff uncertainty. Two of the world's largest nations now in a staring contest to see who blinks first.
There was even legislation in the last Congress authored by Democrats to do it.
Congressional Republicans want to take back power from what they say are rogue judges. The bill looking to limit their impact on the nation. Plus, the student now fighting his school's administration after he was suspended while asking about the absence of American flags in the classroom speaks out. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and on this Weekend Edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week and we look ahead at what to expect, starting with the four big stories we've been following this week. The FAA moves to replace its top executive amid air travel safety concerns. President Trump announces a weekend meeting between U.S. officials and Iran. And HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. now urging the public to get the measles vaccine. Later, a whistleblower testifies in Congress about how she says Meta worked with the Chinese government to censor content. But first, the White House is clarifying that tariffs on China now total 145%. That includes the president's latest tariffs he says will reset global trade, and those tariffs from February aimed at stopping the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar reports from the White House on what comes next.
The Trump trade roller coaster ride isn't over.
There'll be a transition cost and transition problems, but in the end, it's going to be a beautiful thing.
A sense of relief already wearing off 24 hours after President Trump surprised much of the world by announcing a 90-day pause on individualized double-digit tariffs on all trading partners except China.
Everybody wants to come and make a deal, and we're working with a lot of different countries.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says more than 75 countries benefiting from the partial tariff pause have come to the table and confirms the president will be directly involved in negotiations. As for China, they say they're open to talks.
If the U.S. really wants to address issues through dialogue, it should take the attitude of equality, respect, and mutual benefit. And China firmly opposes and never accepts such bullying and hegemonic acts.
The Chinese embassy in the U.S. reiterating in this social media post Thursday, if the U.S. is bent on waging a trade war, China will fight to the end. In its latest retaliation, China taking aim at Hollywood and will limit the number of American movies shown in China.
I think I've heard of worse things.
Back here in the U.S., American business facing a great deal of uncertainty as tariffs on China, plus 10% worldwide tariffs, tariffs on steel, aluminum, and foreign autos are still in effect. Amazon CEO says shoppers should expect to shoulder the burden.
I'm guessing that sellers will pass that cost on. Depending on which country you're in, you don't have 50% extra margin that you can play with.
Given how much the president celebrated the rally on Wall Street Wednesday after his tariff pause, he was asked Thursday to react to stocks wiping out most of those gains. He punted the question to his Treasury Secretary, who said it was basically taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, which he said they're okay with. At the White House, I'm Atra El-Nashar.
If Iran doesn't give up its nuclear program, President Trump says the U.S. military will step in, but Israel will lead the charge.
Did you mean military action, though, if they don't agree?
Oh, if necessary? Absolutely, yeah. If it requires military, we're going to have military. Israel will obviously be very much involved in that. He'll be the leader of that. But nobody leads us. We do what we want to do.
Iran insists it doesn't want a nuclear weapon. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited the White House earlier this week and says he and Trump discussed military options at length. And new details, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee was sworn in to be President Trump's ambassador to Israel after the Senate approved his nomination. Huckabee is a staunch supporter of Israel, which he says is rooted in his religious faith. Last year, he argued against a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, saying the militant group was not capable of having an honorable negotiation. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is urging the public to get the measles vaccine. In a CBS News interview, he stated his position: the government should not mandate the vaccine, but he strongly recommends it. There have been at least 659 reported measles outbreaks this year, according to CNN. 3 deaths have been reported connected to the outbreak, all unvaccinated people. The 2024-25 flu vaccine was not effective in preventing infections this viral season. That's according to a new study at the Cleveland Clinic. 2% of roughly 43,000 adults who were vaccinated for the flu caught the virus during the study. Researchers found those who got the shot came down with the flu more often than those who were not vaccinated. The authors cannot rule out the possibility that other flu vaccines might have been more effective than the one that was tested. Republicans in Congress want to take back some of the power district courts have over nationwide policies and rein in what they believe are rogue judges. The National News Desk, Matt Gelka, reports.
Angered by the repeated court interventions around the country blocking some of the sweeping moves from the Trump administration, Republicans in Congress moved quickly to try and rein in what they believe are rogue judges acting with an agenda. In a 219 to 213 vote, the House passed a bill that limits the power of lower courts and prevents some rulings from applying to the entire country.
There was even legislation in the last Congress authored by Democrats to do it. This is not a partisan issue. It may be a timely issue for this president, but that does not make it partisan.
Lower court rulings have temporarily paused multiple executive actions, including an order ending birthright citizenship that was struck down by different judges appointed by Republican and Democratic presidents. Democrats arguing against the bill said it was authoritarian, giving the president too much unchecked power.
Somehow my colleagues never complained about nationwide injunctions when dozens were issued against former Presidents Obama and Biden. But now that it's against Donald Trump, they want to rig the rules to give the president free rein to do whatever he wants.
Nationwide injunctions have been levied on policies from presidents of both parties. During the Biden administration, courts ruled against some of his COVID mandates, and he tallied 14 injunctions during his 4 years. Through the first 10 days of April, at least 70 rulings had temporarily paused some of the Trump administration's actions.
I think what this will ensure, if this does become law, it will mean that the United States Supreme Court will really be the final judge of major legal issues. The federal district judges will not be able to decide these big, enormous constitutional questions.
There is a companion bill in the Senate, but getting the required votes in that chamber seems like a long shot without Democratic support. The Trump administration has asked the Supreme Court to weigh in on the issue, and the High Court could ultimately decide the lower court's power. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Developing now, a trio of aviation incidents this week. On Thursday, 6 people, including 3 children, died after a helicopter crashed into the Hudson River in New York City. Also Thursday at Washington, D.C.'s Reagan National Airport, 2 planes clip wings. Then on Friday, a small plane crashed just outside the Boca Raton, Florida airport, killing all 3 passengers on board. All 3 incidents are being investigated. And also, the Federal Aviation Administration has announced Department Head Tim Arell will step down early. Arell had plans to retire at the end of 2025, but will now resign in the coming months. The departure comes as the FAA is facing pressure to address the recent safety concerns. The FAA says Arell is retiring as a part of the voluntary deferred resignation program. It looks like the long decline of Christianity in the U.S. might be leveling off. The Fact Check team's Janae Bowens is joining us now with a closer look at the shift. First of all, how many, because the numbers, they are changing, how many Americans identify as Christian according to the new research that you found?
Yeah, Dee, so it's 62% of Americans that identify as Christians, and that's according to a massive new survey by the Pew Research Center, which looked at nearly 37,000 adults. Now, this is notable because because for years we've seen a steady drop in that number. Back in 2007, it was 78%, but over the last 5 years, that decline seems to have leveled off. The Christian share of the population has been holding pretty steady between 60% and 64%.
And also, when you look at the long-term decline, the differences really come to light when you put each generation side by side.
Exactly. So the report shows one big reason behind the long-term shift in religion in the U.S. is something called generational replacement. Basically, older generations who tend to be more religious and mostly Christian are passing away, and they're being replaced by younger generations who are less religious. More young people today identify as having no religion at all, often called nuns. That trend has been pretty steady over time, but in the short term, it looks like things have slowed down or maybe even leveled off a bit.
Interesting. All right, Janae, thank you. Janae will be back in a few moments to discuss what religions are growing here in the U.S. Coming up, the springtime staple now under urgent recall. The suspicious ingredient in popular sausage links you need to toss. Plus, the Marine hopeful and high school student who says he was kicked out of school for his patriotism. A Baltimore County student and an aspiring U.S. Marine taking a stand against his school after he claims he was unlawfully suspended for an issue he says stems from asking why some of his classrooms didn't have an American flag. Earlier this week, I sat down with Parker Jensen to hear his side of the story. As we did mention, we know you are a prospective Marine. Patriotism is important to you, and you say some of your classes were missing American flags. So before we get into all of that, what you say happened next, just tell us what it means to you simply to be able to see the flag at school.
What it means for me to see the flag is it's a representation of all the rights and freedoms that we hold in this great nation. It's also a representation of all the servicemen and women who have fought and sacrificed to uphold our rights and our freedoms.
And we want to play a clip of you working to address what you saw.
Well, indeed. Sorry for my language. That's just crazy to me. You don't think that's a waste of resources, sir? No.
Speak more to us about the flag requirement in classrooms and also what happened when you tried to address with administrators this issue.
When I showed him the law, which is Maryland Education 7-105, he said that he wasn't familiar with it. So at first I was like, all right, well, that's, not everyone is fully aware of all the laws, but I feel like that's a pretty big one.
And Parker, we know you were suspended. Police were called for trespassing. There's some video footage of that. Can you walk us through the explanation you were provided since you attend school at Towson High?
Yes, ma'am. So when the Officer Smith arrived to the parking lot, I stepped out of the public lobby of the Baltimore County Board of Education, and I addressed him. I said, "Hello, sir, how are you doing?" I asked him if I could record, even though legally I don't have to not record, or I don't have to not put my phone down. I am able to record, but I felt like I would give him the respect of it. He said, "Are you with the journalism club at Towson High School?" I said, "No, I'm not with the journalism club, just working on a story about my school." And then he went into his, he asked for my name, and I said, "Parker." He asked for my last name. I said, "Do I have to give it?" He said, "Well, yes, if you're being trespassed." So that's why I said I gave him my last name. But I don't think that he had lawful reason, because you only have to give your name if you're suspected of a crime, which I was not in any violation of any law or crime.
Parker Jensen, thank you so much for joining us tonight on the National News Desk. Let us know as you learn some new developments. We will be curious to see how this plays out.
Thank you very much again.
Baltimore County Public Schools declined an interview with our news team in Baltimore, saying they can't discuss specific student records or disciplinary action. The school system did say in an email, as of April 1st, flags have been installed in the classrooms that did not have them. New information, New Orleans Bourbon Street could permanently close to vehicles. That's after a long-awaited report from counterterrorism experts. It would become a pedestrian plaza instead. This report recommends closing 9 blocks to vehicles, including cross streets. Other recommendations include using more vehicle barricades that are crash-rated to stop vehicles, removing trash cans near parade routes that could hide explosives, and relocating porta potties to keep people waiting in line out of traffic. While the U.S. and China are engaging in a trade war, a top Senate committee is now investigating alleged ties between social media giants and the Chinese. A former Meta executive and whistleblower testifying Facebook collaborated with the Chinese government. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, has more on the shocking allegations.
Sarah Wynne Williams, a former Meta employee and whistleblower, testifying on Capitol Hill Wednesday about how the social media company collaborated with the Chinese government, saying Meta worked hand in glove with the Chinese to censor its platforms. Republican Senator Josh Hawley opening Wednesday's Senate Judiciary hearing with a bold statement.
This is a hearing that Facebook has tried desperately to prevent.
Before the committee testifying, Sarah Wynne Williams, Facebook's former head of global public policy, who also wrote a scathing book about Meta. She told senators Meta worked directly with the Chinese Communist Party to undermine U.S. national security and betray American values.
I witnessed Meta work hand in glove with the Chinese Communist Party.
Wynne Williams also alleging Meta's artificial intelligence model, known as Llama, was used to help develop China's DeepSeek.
Meta's AI model, Llama, has contributed significantly to Chinese advances in AI technologies.
Shortly after her opening statement, Hawley circling back, asking Wynne Williams directly if Meta collaborated with the Chinese government.
Is it your testimony that Facebook executives and employees cultivated relationships with members of the Chinese Communist Party?
Absolutely, Senator.
Rob Laka, a business expert who read Wynne Williams' book, believes testifying today took a lot of courage and was quite eye-opening.
This is someone who is speaking out against some very powerful people.
Laka adding that the people who worry about ethics, specifically when it comes to AI, look at what's being accused with much concern.
If anyone can use this very powerful company's source code, then that code could be used for nefarious means.
Now, a Meta spokesperson called the testimony, quote, divorced from reality and riddled with false claims, adding Meta does not operate its services in China today. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
More than 20,000 pounds of Johnsonville bratwurst are now under recall. The sausage company reported 2 complaints about plastic material in the meat. Johnsonville's cheddar-flavored bratwurst was shipped to stores in 10 states, including Georgia, Indiana, Kansas, and Wisconsin. So far, no reports of any injuries. Customers should throw the meat away or return it to the store. Coming up next, a high-risk wildfire guide draws the ire of Oregonians. Why residents are upset over a map some say doesn't make sense. Then, as cybersecurity experts warning about the unpaid toll scams that are quickly spreading across the country. We're back in 90 seconds. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in Oregon with an effort to get rid of a wildfire risk map that property owners say has imposed unaffordable restrictions.
Lawmakers advancing the repeal of the state wildfire hazard map. The map, created by Senate Bill 762 in 2021 following the devastating 2020 wildfires, established high-risk wildfire areas across the state, impacting over 100,000 properties. Many rural Oregonians say they're unhappy with rising costs.
It made it almost impossible for them to sell their homes, and it made it much harder for them to hold on to insurance that they could afford.
State law says insurers cannot use the map to increase or decrease rates. One Jackson County commissioner says she has heard of some people losing their insurance, but doesn't know if there were extenuating circumstances.
I think insurances are concerned about their viability over the whole wildfire issue.
Residents woke up to the sound of a car flipped upside down in the patio area of this apartment building. Seattle police say a 77-year-old man was inside the car when it plunged about 12 feet. Police believe speed could have been a factor.
There's probably a significant amount of speed because he went over a little barrier and then a railing before he flipped his vehicle onto the patio.
Seattle Fire came out to the scene and extricated the victim and then took him to Harborview Medical Center. At last check, he was in serious condition.
And everything was blocked off. Couldn't get through to park, went up the hill, couldn't get through, went down the hill, couldn't get through. There was just a huge response.
Nearby residents say they've never seen or heard something like this happen in their neighborhood before.
I walk through there with my dog all the time, and unless somebody forgot to set the e-brake or accidentally stepped on the gas, I don't even know how somebody would get through and actually flip. It's kind of wild.
As many as 1 billion texts a day are launched by criminals with the help of AI, claiming unpaid tolls, impersonating everything from Easy Pass and Fast Track to SunPass and Drive Easy Maryland, all designed to steal your money and personal information.
The whole trick here, and as far as prevention, is not to engage at all. Because if someone engages in any manner, it tells the AI, it's not even a human at that point, it tells the AI that this is a human and that you have engaged. And at that point, that person becomes very, very susceptible to a lot more scams, a lot more phishing protocols.
Over 100 burgers and 10 live lobsters? Uber releases its list of the most unusual items riders have left behind. And Black Friday-like frenzy, the tote bags turned viral sensation. Coming up next, the shocking amount some people are willing to pay for the Trader Joe's bags. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now, the Library of Congress announced the soundtrack to the popular sandbox survival video game Minecraft is now among some of the most defining sounds of history and culture, and it is now included in its National Recording Registry. Also, a big rig hauling what is said to be a very large load of cheese overturned and caused closures on an Ohio interstate that lasted for hours. 2 vehicles were involved in the crash, but no one was injured, thankfully, according to authorities. And LeBron James is now the first athlete to have his own Ken doll. Check this out. Mattel announces they will be collaborating with the LeBron James Family Foundation to release the doll of the NBA star. Those stories and much more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. Trader Joe's viral mini tote bags, they are back. You might have seen them. They are now available in spring pastel colors. The exact release date of the bags varies by location, but the new bags have become so desirable. Some are being sold on eBay for nearly 200 times their retail price. Right now, they're selling for $2.99 each and are limited to 4 per customer. So popular. People left some pretty unusual items behind in Ubers last year, and to prove it, we actually just got the rideshare company's 9th annual Lost and Found Index. The most unique lost items listed included a mannequin head with human hair, a Viking drinking horn, Ghostbusters ghost trap, and 10 live lost lobsters. The top 3 most common items left behind in an Uber in 24 were, of course, phones, wallets, and keys in that order. And the top food items included 175 hamburger sliders. The top luxury items, a gold Rolex and Air Jordans worth $1,800. The top 3 most forgetful cities in order: New York, Miami, and Chicago. A lot of interesting stories, I bet, behind these lost items. American Airlines testing a program that would streamline baggage checks for international travelers connecting to domestic flights. It would allow passengers to bypass baggage screening after they go through customs on a layover. Travelers won't have to collect their luggage and recheck it. This pilot program, called International Remote Baggage Screening, is done in partnership with U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. Bill. Coming up on the National News Desk, deciding who stays or goes. Why President Trump's top border official says ICE should be given full autonomy to carry out the president's agenda. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. Catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
They've killed more Americans with their fentanyl and their drugs than any terrorist organization in the world.
Rules of engagement, a terrorist designation on cartels has the CIA thinking strategy. The war on drugs that may involve the U.S. military crossing the southern border.
It will be heard to wake people up.
Aiding victims of migrant crime, the Trump administration relaunches its effort to help American families. And access restored. The media outlet now allowed back into the White House thanks to a Trump-appointed judge. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We're glad you're here with us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. As we come back on the air, new reports in Washington, D.C. of a dramatic escalation in what may be the next steps at the southern border. President Trump has said repeatedly he wants to wage war on cartels. As the National News Desk, Christine Frizzell reports, there's new evidence that may involve the U.S. military.
The pressure campaign against Mexican cartels began on President Trump's first day in office as he signed an executive order designating them a foreign terrorist organization.
President Trump, if cartels are now going to be seen as foreign terror organizations, would you think about ordering U.S. Special Forces into Mexico to take them out?
Could happen. Stranger things have happened.
The cartels, viewed by the president as the biggest beneficiary of the record-breaking mass migration, raking in billions of dollars, smuggling in millions of people, along with drugs.
They've killed more Americans with their fentanyl and their drugs than any terrorist organization in the world.
Now, new reports the CIA is reviewing its authorities to use lethal force against them. While the U.S. military massively expanded its role in helping to secure the border, Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum is warning penetrating it won't be tolerated.
This is not just about what's legal, but about repercussions if others are harmed in an attack. The proximity to the U.S. border carries higher risks of collateral damage. This changing landscape is all part of a bigger plan by the White House to crack down on what it sees as terrorists threatening our national security.
The case of more than 200 people sent from the United States to this prison in El Salvador under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 could be just the first of many. The Supreme Court essentially green-lighting its use for now, after being put on hold by a lower court judge. Still, lawyers for some of them insist they are not criminals and have no connections whatsoever to gangs, as previously claimed by the White House.
That they can whisk someone out of the country by accident and then have no responsibility to fix, what they've broken just doesn't make sense as a legal matter and is also just disturbing as a matter of constitutional law.
The law and the Constitution in the spotlight as President Trump implements new methods and policies on immigration. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
New information, Trump's border czar says immigration agents are the principal deciders on gang affiliation. In an exclusive interview with Axios, Tom Homan said if ICE says an immigrant is linked to a gang, it's backed up by evidence from social media, criminal and immigration records, as well as surveillance. Homan indicated detainees' rights to due process should be limited, but the Supreme Court ruled on Monday migrants must get the chance to challenge their deportation.
The most important principle that came out of that is that they said that you can't go venue shopping for this. They're going to return that back to the court in Texas where it belonged, and I think that's a very important step.
The ruling says legal challenges must take place in Texas, where they are being held, instead of a Washington, D.C. courtroom. 2 states have issued orders to block some deportations of migrants who are challenging the Alien Enemies Act. Federal judges in New York and Texas issued a temporary halt on deportations of Venezuelan plaintiffs. In Texas, the order is set to expire on April 23rd. A hearing for a possible extension on Friday. Meantime, the New York York plaintiffs are seeking class action certification. Wednesday's rulings come after the American Civil Liberties Union filed an emergency lawsuit. An office designated for assisting victims of immigration crime, known as VOICE, is relaunching. President Trump established the office in his first term. Former President Biden closed it in favor of a different system. Acting Director of ICE Todd Lyons says the office also helps people victimized by someone with a visa or other legal status. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says the office's mission is a priority for President Trump.
The Voice office will be here to make sure that these victims and their stories will be heard, but it will be heard to wake people up and allow them to continue to impact policy and the direction that this country is going.
I want to make it clear that the Voice office help isn't limited to specific crimes. Whether an alien commits fraud, sexual abuse, murder, drunk driving crimes, battery, or other criminal offenses, we can help.
Families of victims of immigration-related crimes are eligible to receive legal aid referrals through the office, as well as updates about enforcement actions against the accused. The Federal Aviation Administration is making changes to the leadership at Reagan National Airport. They come in the wake of the deadly mid-air collision in January, a series of close calls, and a fistfight in the control tower. 3 air traffic control managers at DCA have been removed from their roles and offered reassignment elsewhere. And the head of the FAA's air traffic organization is retiring early as part of the Transportation Department buyout. New developments: the Trump administration is reversing its sweeping cuts of emergency food aid to several nations, except for 2 of the most war-ravaged. Officials at the U.S. Agency for International Development and United Nations tell the Associated Press funding has been restored for programs in Somalia, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and Ecuador. But the aid is still cut off for Afghanistan and Yemen. The White House didn't provide a reason for the reversal. Aid workers warn the cuts would deny food to millions and end programs for women and children. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll is the new acting director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. In recent weeks, acting director of the ATF, Kash Patel, made waves with plans to move up to 1,000 ATF agents to the FBI. The plan that was shelved amid backlash. A justice official said the change at the ATF has nothing to do with Patel's job performance. This week, a federal judge ruled that White House's ban on the Associated Press is unconstitutional. In the preliminary injunction issued Tuesday, U.S. District Judge Trevor McFadden, a Trump appointee, said viewpoint discrimination goes against the Constitution. Earlier this year, the Trump administration banned the AP from covering presidential events over its refusal to use Gulf of America. The judge did not immediately restore AP's access, delaying his order for a week to allow the White House time to appeal. The Trump administration halted federal funding for Cornell and Northwestern universities. That's more than $1 billion for Cornell and around $790 million for Northwestern. Both universities are under federal investigation for alleged violations of civil rights. The New York Times reports the pause involves grants and contracts with several departments, including agriculture, defense, and education. By the numbers, eggs are more expensive than ever right now. Get this, the price for a dozen eggs hit a record high of $6.23 last month, according to new Labor Department data. This, despite the fact that wholesale prices are down and bird flu outbreaks are slowing. More than 30 million egg-laying chickens were killed to stop the disease from spreading. Economists say the demand is now at its peak, with Easter fast approaching. After years of steady decline, there are signs that the number of Americans who identify as Christians is starting to level off. 62% of Americans now identify as Christians, according to the Pew Research Center. At the same time, the share of Americans who identify with a religion other than Christianity is increasing. The Fact Check team's Janae Bones is back. These are some really interesting findings, Janae. Tell us more. What are the numbers?
Well, Dee Dee, 7% of Americans now identify identify with a religion other than Christianity. It doesn't seem like much, but back in 2007, that number was only 4.7%, so there is some growth. The top non-Christian religions are Judaism, Islam, and Buddhism.
And we know that the decline of Christianity, it appears to be losing steam. However, experts are not sure that this will last, and it's because of the differences between the younger generation and older Americans, correct?
Exactly. So only 46% of 18 to 24-year-olds identify as Christian, and they are less likely to pray daily and say they attend religious services at least monthly compared to their older counterparts. Now, experts say that for the religious landscape to really settle, either today's young adults would need to become more religious as they get older, or future generations would need to be more religious than the ones before them.
All right, yeah, as we discussed, kind of the disconnect between the generations there. Janae, thank you. For more on this Fact Check Team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com. Still to come, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from a seemingly escalating tariff war with China to the White House cutting off federal funding to elite colleges and universities.
And welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. President Trump's tariffs dominating the news this past week. He announced a 90-day pause on most tariffs, but he notably escalated the tariff war with China, saying he wants to fix a decades-long trade imbalance that has favored China. National correspondent Audra Elnishar, another item creating tension between the U.S. and China, the future of TikTok. What's the latest there, and how will this tariff war affect that situation?
Absolutely, Steve. Well, the president's got sort of a phrase he's been liking to use lately, and that's, you don't have the cards, we have the cards when it comes to negotiations. Well, one of the cards China has is TikTok. They basically, under Chinese law, can tell businesses what to do. Oversimplifying it, but that's essentially the case. So they can control whether or not ByteDance, the owner of TikTok, can sell their algorithm. And under a national security law here in the U.S. that we've done tons of reporting on, TikTok has to be spun off from its Chinese parent company. The deadline was last week. Well, the president ended up having to extend that deadline because before this most recent round of tariffs kicked in, reportedly, it's been widely reported now after the fact, that the White House was extremely close, this close apparently, to reaching a deal and signing on the dotted line, so to speak, with Beijing to bring TikTok under enough American ownership that it would comply with this national security law and TikTok would be able to survive and go on operating in the United States. But once the president enacted those tariffs, Beijing said, nope, deal's off. So the president had to extend that deadline, and now it's up in the air whether TikTok will survive. And Beijing knows that card, that TikTok algorithm that they can control, is huge leverage, because how many people in your life, viewers at home, do you know use TikTok? Maybe you're on TikTok right now scrolling a little bit. They know that is a huge political card that they can use in these tariff negotiations, because the president does not want to be blamed for the reason that TikTok went away.
And the president wants to keep TikTok going. He has said it throughout the campaign and currently, so we'll see where that all heads. Meanwhile, the Trump administration continuing to threaten cutting off federal funding for elite colleges and universities. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, you've been following this story. What's new there?
Yeah, the administration making good on those threats by freezing another $1 billion, Steve, of federal funding for Cornell University, and then $790 million of federal funding frozen for Northwestern. Both of these schools now face investigations over allegations of anti-Semitism on campus, and this goes back to the demonstrations and really the atmosphere on campus that has pervaded many of America's elite universities since the October 7th attack on Israel. And Cornell and Northwestern are just the latest in a slew of schools that have faced these types of funding freezes, funding slashes so far. Columbia University, one of the first ones to really get this slap by the White House. They froze $400 million for them. Harvard, UPenn, and Princeton also on that list. Now, Columbia University was given a list of demands by the Trump administration of what they could do to try to restore some of that funding. And they said they would do essentially everything on that list. Not every school is reacting that way. Princeton has said that they won't make such concessions. But Steve, going back to an example of what these students have been saying they've been feeling on campus and kind of why this funding has been put into jeopardy now. Just this week at Princeton University, a Jewish student said she was called an inbred, swine by demonstrators when she was heading into an event by a former prime minister of Israel. At Cornell University, back in 2023, directly after basically the October 7th attack, one of the Cornell professors was celebrating the attack, calling it exhilarating and exciting. That professor still has his job. He still teaches at Cornell University. So these are the types of this is the type of atmosphere. This is the type of issue that the White House is trying to tackle with these games, essentially, that they're trying to play with funding.
Right, and critics saying that withholding important funds that they say from these colleges is too punitive of a punishment for these colleges, universities, and there's a lot of pushback from folks at those schools and from Trump's critics. Also this past week, the House passed the No Rogue Rulings Act aimed at curbing the power of federal district court judges. National correspondent Matt Galka, fill us in on why this has become such a controversy.
Yeah, Steve, this is a long-running issue. Democratic presidents hate the injunctions, national injunctions that get passed when they're in power. Republican presidents hate the national injunctions that get ordered when they're in power. But the reason this has legs right now is because Republicans in Congress are very angry over how district courts have slowed down and at some point stopped a lot of the executive actions that the Trump administration has taken. So the idea of impeaching judges has been tossed around, but the votes likely aren't there. So this is the next best thing that Republicans think they can do, which is to take that district court power, the power that some of those district court judges have, to stop nationwide policies in their tracks while it's figured out, to take that power away and really limit it to only the people who are suing. Now, Democrats, like I said, this has been an issue before where Democratic presidents didn't like it and Democrats have raised the issue. But now, because there's a Republican in power, obviously the minority party is going to say, hey, we don't like this. This is too much unchecked power for the president to have. Democrats right now calling it authoritarian and basically saying the president would have the powers of a king. But the bottom line in this, if this were ever to become a law, it only passed the House now, and it's a long shot in the Senate. But if this were to become a law, it does give the president more power to enact executive actions. But people we talk to are saying the Supreme Court is likely going to have to decide this. The Trump administration has asked them to decide this. And basically, the Supreme Court would be the arbiter of national issues and not district judges who are ruling on these things from certain states. The Supreme Court would, again, have to be the be-all, end-all to deciding some of these big national constitutional stakes.
Republicans say it's the number of injunctions against President Trump compared to his predecessors. What is that number? It was 70 injunctions so far?
Yeah. Through the first 10 days of April, it was at 70 already. Now, just to compare, through 4 years of Joe Biden's presidency, there were 14.
Right, and so they point to that. And of course, Democrats say, well, if the president wasn't doing as many controversial or in some ways illegal things that they say, then he wouldn't have so many injunctions against him. So we'll see how this plays out. Matt, Kayla, Audra, always great reporting. Thanks for your hard work. Back to you.
Global energy usage is not only increasing, but evolving. A new report from energy think tank Ember says renewables and nuclear energy provided more than 40% of the world's power generation last year. Solar accounts for most of the increase, along with wind generation. Despite the increase in the share of renewable energy, demand continues to outpace its production. In 2024, global energy consumption increased by 4%, which contributed to CO2 emissions rising to 16.1 billion tons, according to the International Energy Agency. The U.S. tourism industry expected 2025 to be another good year for international travelers visiting the states. However, 3 months into the year and international arrivals are plummeting. Early data shows visits to the U.S. from overseas fell more than 11% in March. From January to March, more than 7 million passengers entered to the U.S. That is down 3% from last year. Travel experts believe Trump's tariffs and arrests at the border are swaying international travelers to visit elsewhere. Coming up next, Ohio residents sound off on the state's latest gun law, and thrift store thefts. The retail shop owner speaking out amid a wave of shoplifting now impacting his bottom line. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We start in San Luis Obispo, California, where a thrift shop owner took justice into his own hands.
Why are you taking our stuff?
Okay, here.
Okay, but you're gonna have to wait for the police. I'm gonna get, and there's stuff inside. You took both of our Gucci bags.
When you really build something from the ground up like this, like, it's so personal. So someone's stealing something that is yours, you know, and it's different, like, it's tough.
From his home garage to a 27,000 square feet vintage store, Thrifty Beaches, Adam Kemp built a place for those who are into vintage fashion, can buy, sell, and trade pieces. But one of the things Kemp says he's been facing is thefts. He does his part by going after them in the hope they cooperate, but when they don't...
I'm a compassionate person. People need a helping hand, and I'm always there for people, you know? So I rather have that conversation and be able to make the choice to choose what item I want to give away, you know, instead of someone just taking it.
In Columbus, Ohio, a new gun law is in effect. Senate Bill 58 prevents financial institutions from tracking gun purchases and prohibits firearm liability insurance for gun owners. Supporters calling it a Second Amendment victory.
Give people the ability to have that Second Amendment and purchase firearms comes with a lot. And so taking this out of the mix is really a headache that we were concerned about for the last couple years. Now knowing that going forward, that's something that we don't have to worry about.
Others feel the insurance would have mitigated the risk of owning guns and would have protected families from the financial and emotional impact of accidental shootings. In Austin, Texas, state workers head to the street with a list of demands, including better wages. At the steps of the Capitol, their message was clear.
We say fight back! We are praying that today makes a difference, but if we don't fight for ourselves, then nobody will. So our motto in union is, if we fight, we win.
The goal is to get an across-the-board $10,000 salary increase. Still ahead, scientists revive a wolf species believed to be extinct. The role DNA from tens of thousands of years ago played in their return. An ancient animal's DNA has helped its return from extinction. These three young, they're dire wolves. They were born in October and they are being raised in an unknown nature preserve. Colossal Biosciences says the pups carry the traits of the long-lost giant dogs from 12,000 years ago. The team took DNA from a 13,000-year-old tooth and a 72,000-year-old skull to clone the pups. The dire wolves sound familiar to you. They were popular on HBO's Game of Thrones. New research suggests having a pet could improve your well-being as much as being married or having more money. A study published last week in the journal Social Indicators Research says having a pet could help with life satisfaction as much as having more money. A co-author of the paper says if pets improve life satisfaction as much as the study suggests, policymakers should make it easier for people to own them. That'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, have a great week.